Hi, welcome back to the shed for episode 37 of GGBO 2023. And in this episode, we're going to tackle all the little jobs that we found last time and hopefully get ourselves in a position where we can start the finish prep on this guitar. We left last time with me compiling a list of about 8 little jobs that we need to do before we can start to get this thing into finish. None of them are particularly huge. A couple of them are going to be relatively tricky, but nothing too daunting. And nothing that I'm particularly worried about, but they do all need sorting out before we can move further forward with these. We've got to sort out these pots. This pot doesn't extend through the body enough to be bolted in position, so that needs sorting. These 2 pots actually extend too far into the cavity, so they stop the cavity cover sitting nicely, so they need addressing too. We need to do a little bit of work to the routs for the tremolo, because we changed a component in the tremolo, and that means that the routs are a little bit too small now. So we need to address that. We need to install the pickup, which I couldn't do last time because I didn't have the screws, but I do have the screws and springs now, so that can be done. There might be a few more little bits and bobs up here to do, but nothing major. But the first 2 jobs I want to tackle are actually at the other end on the headstock. And they are fitting the little string retainer that's going to hold the strings down into the slots in the nut. I was kind of hoping not to have one of these. I don't really like the look, but needs must. I do need it. It will affect the performance of the guitar. This is going to be tricky enough to set up as it is, and without this string retainer it adds another kind of variable into the mix that I don't want. So that needs putting in place. It's a simple job, a couple of screws, and that will hold the strings down nicely. The other job I'm going to do up here is I've got this little chrome block to hold the 2 Allen keys that are pretty much essential for running this guitar. If you need to do anything, whether it's a string change or adjust the tremolo, etc., you pretty much need these Allen keys. So it's important that they are with the guitar all the time. So they are going to be fastened onto the back of the headstock. I've checked, there's more than enough room. And to be honest, it doesn't look that bad. It looks okay. So we'll get set up, we'll get a few tools on the bench, and we'll start by doing those 2 little bits. And basically, to set this up, I want it to be positioned parallel with the back edge of the nut at a position where the actual retainer is within the headstock. So I need something to space it with, and I think this square will give me just about the spacing I need. And this is one of those jobs where 3 hands would be absolutely amazing. Now I'm just going to hold that in position and I'll mark it with a drill bit. The screws are 2.5 mil, so I'm using a 2 mil drill bit. And this is quite difficult because I can't really put a flag on because I've got the strings in the way. So I'll just wrap a piece of tape around the drill bit just to act as a guide for how far I want to drill in, so I don't go too far, because obviously the last thing I want to do is drill all the way through. Just get a bit of wax onto those screws just to help them go in a bit, protect them from breaking. People often ask about this if they haven't seen a lot of my videos. All it is a block of candle wax that I've melted down, and I just coat screws. I use it to lubricate planes, soles and everything. Very handy to have around the workshop. I'm just going to detune the strings a bit, just to make it a little bit easier to screw in. We can send those screws home. And those strings now are sat exactly in the right place. So we'll get that tuned up again and we can put those clamps in place. Okay, so that's fitted. We're all back up to tune. So next is we need to put these clamps on. I can already feel that those are down where they need to be now, so if there is any movement, it will absolutely be minimal. So we'll just clamp those into position. This whole Floyd Rose thing has been an absolutely massive learning curve for me. And I feel that that learning curve hasn't reached its peak. I think there's still a fair way for me to go before I've completely got this sussed out. I've got to get it set up properly and properly balanced in the cavity, which could be an issue, but I've actually really enjoyed it. So it's not a problem, it's an opportunity. Now that still sounds pretty much in tune, but we'll scoot down the other end of the guitar and we'll just see what it looks like on the tuner. So that's ever so slightly sharp, but it's literally a tiny tweak on that fine tuner. So very little needed there to get that back in tune. And that all seems to be working fine. It's not properly set up yet. The bridge is pulled back a little bit, which means I need to take some of the spring tension off, but I'm not bothered about that at this phase. This is purely just to make sure that everything's kind of within the ballpark of where we need it to be. But before we do that, we've still got one little job to do on the headstock, which is to put that little Allen key holder in place. And again, this is basically, it's a repeat of the job we've just done on the front. The only difference being these screws are slightly smaller. These are 2mm rather than 2.5, so we need a 1.5mm hole drilling for them. I've squared a line across where I want it to go. I'll just hold that kind of in position so that they're not poking out anywhere, and hopefully from there, yeah, we can get them out okay. Otherwise I won't be wasting my time. So I'll just very quickly mark where those screws need to go. And these screws don't have to go in very far at all. But again, I'll put a bit of tape on there just to guide me, so I don't poke any holes into anything. And these are absolutely tiny little screws. So we'll use a tiny little screwdriver. And there it is. It's not the prettiest bit of kit ever seen, but functionality has to play a part, I think, in this element of the guitar. So that's two jobs out of the way up the headstock. So I think from here we can actually start stripping this back down again in preparation for all the other jobs that need doing on the body end. Okay, so the tremolo's out. I've left the claw in exactly the position it was, so that when I do some work on this area, I can just put the springs back in and theoretically it should be in the same setup. So we should tell if it's going to work or not with the actions that we've taken. But before I get on to that, I just want to very quickly address the situation with this battery holder. You may remember that the screw heads were stopping it from accepting its battery properly. This one should be a very quick fix. It's just a matter of Putting a nice deep countersink in there. Bang that screw back in. And the same to the other two. This one might be a bit tight. I'm sure we'll be fine. And that's much better. Fits in an awful lot better now. And actually comes out properly too. So that's that bit done. So we can take that out, because that's going to be in the way of any routing operations that we're going to need to do in there. However, I think next up I'm actually going to look at these controls and see if we can get these sorted out, just to get this cavity cover fitting back how it did before we put them in. So first step in that is to get the knobs off on the other side, and we can then start to just assess the situation to see exactly what we need to be getting done. And I'm just going to start by looking at this situation with the cover with just one of those in. And it's barely anything. I think if we can go down between 0.5 and 1 millimetre, we will have created the clearance we need. So we'll just get everything out and we'll have a look at it. Now, looking at these pots, there isn't actually anything that we can kind of take off there. There isn't like a collar that's sticking up that meant I could just countersink those a little bit to allow that to drop in. It's actually the whole of that little area there that's holding it proud. So we'd need to take at least the thickness of that off to kind of give us the clearance we need. And on this smaller pot, we haven't actually got that much thread at all. There's about 4.5 mil maybe of thread sticking out. So if I just take a quick measurement of the thickness of that cavity floor, that's 7.2 mil. I think we only need 5 or 6 mil of thickness on the bottom of that cavity. That's plenty of material. So I think for speed and efficiency, the quickest thing we can do is just route out 2 or 3 mil from the bottom of there, just to give us the extra space that we need. But to do that, I think I'm going to have to set up some kind of base that will allow my router to deal with this little lip in the body. Now, if I can find it, the template that we used to cut the cavity in the first place would be a pretty good thing to have on hand at this stage. So I'll see if I can find that, just to make things a little bit simpler. Okay, so I've got this set up ready to go. I've found that little template. I've had to trim a little bit off this edge, but it has brought me up higher than I need to be. But that meant that there was a bit of a step back down to that top. So I measured that at 6 mil. So I've just found a piece of 6 mil MDF. It's actually a template. I didn't have any kind of blank stock knocking about. So I've got the small router set up. It's actually quite a deep cut. It's going in, we're actually at 45 mil from the base with this cutter. It's set up to take a 2 mil pass from the bottom of here. I'm not routing to this template though. That's the template for the cover. I'm actually going to run the bearing around the top of the existing route. And just check that that's a thing. And that will work just fine. So hopefully that 2 mil of extra clearance at the bottom of here will do the job that we need it to do. So I'll get some ear defenders on and we'll just get this nipped out. Okay, so that cover's gone on absolutely spot on now. That's perfect. So that's worked. So now we just need to test whether we've actually got enough clearance on this little pot. I'm not supremely confident that we will have. It's close, but it's not quite there. But I'm not going to take any more thickness out of the whole of that cavity area because I just think that's going to be a little bit too risky. But what I can do, there is a little shoulder on this pot which is a little bit above the rest of everything else. So I'm going to just try and put a bit of a big countersink onto the back of there and just see if that will open it up enough that that pot will then go through. And that did it. That's all it took. So that's those two little jobs ticked off the list, which means we're down to the last two, which is properly fitting the pickup, and the last one I'm going to do, which is to extend these routes. And I'm leaving that till last because I'm a big yellow chicken and it's going to be quite scary. So next up is the pickup, and to get this pickup in, it's very straightforward really. I've got some screws and some springs. We need to screw it in. However, this is going to be direct mounted, obviously not through a pickup ring. So that means that instead of having a set screw going through a pickup ring, through a screw and then into here, so that the spring's on top of the pickup lug, we're actually going to put the spring underneath and the screw goes through. And that means we need to do a little bit of work on the pickup itself, because as it stands, these screws won't go through. So we just need to open out the holes in the lug ever so slightly. So I'm just going to simply run a 2.5mm drill bit through there. And then to position this, I'm just going to kind of feed the wire in. It's a tight fit, so there isn't a lot of wriggle room. Mark where that hole's going to go and drill that pilot hole. So I'll put the pickup back in with the spring and the screw in this side, and then from there we can square things across and mark out the second hole. Okay, so that's the pickup in. Looks great, happy with that. All looks nice and square, so there's not any problems there. So having got that in, I'll whip it straight back out again. We'll get these studs out and we can start to look at what we need to do just to get this routing sorted out properly. And I think the best way I can approach this is just to do some very quick maths. So the original block was 7.9mm. So we'll call that 8mm for the sake of argument. This one is best part of 13mm. So that's 5mm more. Now I'm assuming this block has gone on centrally. The holes in this one are central, and I seem to remember them being central on the replacement as well. So that means 2.5mm of difference. So that means that the new block is 2.5mm closer to this wall of the route than the old one was. So I think what I will do is I'm going to measure 3mm. I don't think any of this is absolutely vital, so I need to route back to that line. Now there's a few ways I could do this, but I think the best one will be to set up the side of this template that I didn't butcher when we originally routed this. And if I can set that up on the center line, hopefully that will give me the rounded detail I need at the end as well to make this look nice. I don't need to go right to the kind of extremities of this route because the bit I'm clearancing for only kind of goes into this middle bit. So I'll set that up, super glue and masking tape, and then hopefully we can very quickly route out the material that we don't need. Okay, and that seems to have gone okay. It wasn't the sharpest cutter in the world, but it's taken that line back to where I wanted it. But with that out of the way, I can now refit the tremolo and just make sure that that's given us the amount of travel that we wanted. Okay, so that's all back together again. Obviously, it's not set up in any way, shape or form, but from a kind of a level position, which is where it would be if it was properly set up, there's a huge amount of downward travel now. You know, the bar is pretty much down to the body, so I can't see us wanting any more downward travel than that. So I'm going to call that done, call that a success, and that is all of those little bits and pieces sorted out. So hopefully we are now at the stage where we can start to do the finish preparation. I'm going to reassemble this off camera just to make sure that everything's working exactly as it should do. I can't see there being any more problems. And then we can get on with the finish prep. But that's going to be for the next episode. So I'm going to leave this one here. As always, don't forget to hit that like button if you've been enjoying this series. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.